The plot was like a 3, but the romance was a 5. I don't know what the book was about, but I was like, yeah, I'm never reading that. If you are a found family stan, you have to read this book. The vibes remind me so much of the Spiderwick Chronicles. If you're a fan of the Inheritance games, like, where do you stand on this issue? Well, I just filmed this intro once already, saying that it was my March reading wrap-up, so I have high expectations for this video. Today, I'm going to be telling you all about the books that I read in April and the ones that I would like to read in May. April was a very difficult reading month for me. I was in a huge reading slump, and that is because I discovered the Once Upon a Broken Heart series the month before. I mean, the vlog is up already if you would like to see it. I recommend. It was really fun. But yeah, this is one of the most fun reading experiences I have had in so many years. I wanted to go back into this world as soon as I closed the page on the last chapter. So needless to say, I fell into quite a bit of a slump after that. So this month was just kind of a little bit of everything. I started with trying out some new manga series because I have said probably the last 2 years that one of my reading resolutions for the new year was to read more manga. First of all, I started Spy Family. Yes, very late to the game on this one. I never really understood how people could fall for manga characters, which sounds super hypocritical coming from someone who has about 10 different fictional boyfriends. But for some reason, words on the page versus pictures on the page, I thought was gonna be different in my brain. But this man, look at this man. He is beauty, he's grace, he is perfection in his face. I'm sure it probably does have something to do with the fact that his name is Twilight, and obviously that conjures up very positive emotions for me subconsciously. So, I mean, I was probably destined to like him anyway. The other manga series that I'm currently in the middle of is called The Savior's Book Cafe in Another World. Honestly, a little bit of a letdown, and it was good. It's not that it was bad per se, it was just boring. The main character is selected by this mystical god power thing to be sent to another world as the savior of the world. And at first she's like, I'm good. And honestly, it was so funny because she was just like, yeah, I'm in my 30s. I'm pretty settled in my life. I don't really need that. But he convinces her to go and then sets her up with all of these magical powers on the front end of just magically knowing how to do things. And so, I don't know, it felt too easy in the beginning, and then it was quite slow. I understand why, because her whole thing as a main character is I'm not really interested in having this big epic adventure in another world. I literally just want you to let me open a book cafe out in the middle of nowhere. I just want to be able to do my own thing. So of course it's gonna be slow, and I should have been expecting that going into it, but it dragged a little. But then you get to the end and you start to see the romance develop between the savior and one of the guards at the palace in this world, and that was really good. The plot was a 3, but the romance was a 5. Now moving on to the books that I purchased this month, because I bought a few. First up, we have the book that I am currently reading, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I was looking for a classic to read, actually, and I wasn't really finding any that were interesting me, and then I came across this book and I found out it is actually based on an Edgar Allan Poe short story. And I love me some Edgar Allan Poe, so I was like, okay, that'll be so fun, read the short story and then compare it to the book. So I read the short story. It's called The Fall of the House of Usher, and it is amazing. It's literally only 12 pages long, and yet it has you gripped. Anybody who can weave a tale that is very, very interesting and compelling in that short of amount of time, I mean, he's just so incredibly talented. Not that that was really up for dispute, but it's basically about this family whose family lineage has kind of been inexplicably linked to this house that they live in. It's very, very creepy, very gothic. There's so many descriptions of this ancient decrepit house, and it is just kind of terrifying. And it's not in a jump scare kind of way, but just in a eerie feeling kind of way, you know, like kind of a fun scary. And so then this book is basically just like a retelling of that story, or it's kind of like expanding on it. Even though this is a really short book, it's like less than 200 pages, it's like longer than 12 pages, so it's like expanding on the original story. And I'm gonna be honest, I have seen this cover before and I didn't know what the book was about, but I was like, yeah, I'm never reading that because it's very creepy. It's a very unsettling cover. But when you actually start to read the book, you realize this is literally one of the most ingenious cover designs I have ever seen. It perfectly encapsulates what this book is about. The very first sentence in this book is literally like my new favorite opening sentence. Hold on, I have to read it for you. The mushroom's gills were the deep red color of severed muscle, the almost violet shade that contrasts so dreadfully with the pale pink of viscera. I had seen it any number of times in dead deer and dying soldiers, but it startled me to see it here. And so it's like immediately you get like these very vivid descriptions of like the mushrooms on the cover and how creepy they are, and it just perfectly sets the tone. And look at the end pages. They're so creepy and cool. This is the first book I have ever read that could even remotely be classified as horror, and it's really more like eerie than it is like terrifying, but I'm having a lot of fun. Okay, and then another book that I purchased, well actually you saw me purchase these two. I posted my Barnes & Noble like book shopping vlog. I guess it would have gone up last week. So definitely go watch that if you haven't, but spoiler alert, I purchased two books. I got Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, and I also got, it's upside down, got The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And this one was really more of a cover buy. Like I went in wanting one of these cloth-bound classics because I've never gotten one before, and the moths on this one are just so cool and cottagecore. But then this one I actually am like reading it. I'm not that far into it, maybe like 4 or 5 chapters, but it is already so atmospheric. The vibes remind me so much of the Spiderwick Chronicles, which is one of my favorite movies from my childhood. It's basically set in a world where fairies are like known to exist, but people still don't really know very much about them. And so our main character is an academic. She's a scholar, she's learned, and her thesis she's writing on this particular like group of fae in, I think, Finland. It's like one of the Scandinavian countries. And so she's out in this remote village in the middle of nowhere, and she's studying this particular group of fae. Okay, and then my last purchase this month was actually a TikTok purchase. People rave about this book, and that is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. It says on the back, "True love is just a matter of time. Alone with You in the Ether is a contemporary love story like no other, exploring the nature of love, what it means to be unwell, and how to face the fractures of ourselves and still love as if we're not broken." I have a very strong feeling about it, like I'm really gonna like it. Moving on to the books that I DNF'd. There are only 2 this month, and if you don't know me, you may not realize this, but I DNF books left and right. Like if I'm not into it in the first like 20, 30, 40 pages, I have no problem dropping it. So the fact that I only DNF'd 2 this month, especially since I was like in a very deep reading slump, that is actually really good for me. The first one I DNF'd was Orange. I really did give it a chance, and I loved it until I found out what it was actually gonna be about. It was too sad. I was like, I am just not in the right headspace emotionally. Like I wasn't prepared for that. And the other book that I DNF'd, this was such a disappointment because I was so excited for it. It's called Stars and Smoke by Marie Lu. I've never read any of her books, but I know that she's very popular, so like I had pretty solid expectations going into it because of her. But on top of that, I'm a huge K-pop stan. And so this book is basically about a K-pop star named Winter who gets kind of recruited by this spy agency because he's the only person that can like get them access to this crime boss through the guy's daughter because the daughter is like obsessed with Winter and his music. So they recruit him and they pair him up with another like young spy, and they're gonna like go in together, infiltrate this like crime ring in London, and it sounded so interesting, but it was just, I don't know, it was kind of boring, to be honest. Like, I loved Winter's character. I thought he was really interesting, but the spy that he's paired up with, I can't even remember her name. She was just very flat, whereas he was a very well-developed character. I don't know, there was just something about the main girl character in this book that I wasn't really vibing with, which would have been fine if the plot was like really, really interesting, but it almost kind of felt like the mission like wasn't a big enough deal. Like the stakes weren't high enough. I mean, it's not like a thriller, like it's a YA contemporary like spy romance, but I still was expecting the plot to be like more exciting and more like edge of the seat. And I literally got 50% of the way through the book and was still very bored. So I just was like, forget it. Now for the things that I would like to read in the month of May. But as we know, I'm a huge mood reader. So really this is just like what I think I might like to read in this particular moment that will probably change. First of all, actually, I have a serious dilemma and I genuinely need feedback on this. The Inheritance Games series. She's writing a follow-up series with these characters, and she just posted the first like 2 or 3 chapters of the upcoming book on her website. And so this is the part that I need help deciding. Okay, I need to decide whether or not I want to go ahead and read the preview of those chapters now, or if I just want to wait for when the book is actually released. Because see, the thing is, everything inside of me is screaming like, I wanna know. But I also know that if I read the first few chapters like 3 months early and then I don't have the rest of the book to read, I'm probably going to lose my mind. So I don't know. If you're a fan of the Inheritance Games, like, where do you stand on this issue? Okay, so anyway, now for like the books that I actually do want to read. First up, I have gotten on a great side of TikTok, and that is the side that has like self-published authors talking about their books. So recently I came across a TikTok. It was just so dark academia and beautiful, and it had this gorgeous classical piano song in the background, and it said it was kind of similar to the Deadly Education series by Naomi Novik, which I love, and it is called Modern Divination by Isabel. I'm not gonna try to say her last name because I know I'm gonna say it wrong, but Isabel's Modern Divination. Set at a university, and our main character has like green magic, so she can make things grow, and she uses like plants and their like special abilities, and she's trying to basically balance like the normal side of her life with like the magical side. And then, okay, listen, if you are a found family stan, you have to read this book because it is giving me very strong like Weasley family vibes, like the way that they just kind of bring Harry and Hermione into their family. Because okay, this is the last little bit of the summary. It says, cast into an unexpected alliance with her dreadfully arrogant classmate, Aurelia goes into hiding among a peculiar family of witches, where she discovers that the secret to their safety requires breaking rules she has followed all her life. Make no promises, tell no one what you are, and never say the night. That is just an amazing summary. I don't know if it was the author that wrote their own summary or who did it, but that is just an amazing way to describe a book. But yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Next up, I have a book that I want to read that might seem a little bit strange, and I do recognize that, but the reason that I have this book on my TBR is because of the T. Kingfisher book, because after starting that one, I got into kind of like a eerie vibe place, I don't know, but I came across this book called All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell, and it's basically all about like the death industry. So like she just kind of like interviews all of these people who have jobs related to death and kind of like what they do and the logistics of it, because it's something that like as a society we just tend not to talk about as much. And so I thought it would be really interesting because I realized I really don't know very much about any of those jobs. And in particular, it just made me think of this one episode of the Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which I know this is like super weird tangent, but there's this one episode where for whatever reason, Kim decides that she wants to learn how to do like mortuary makeup. It never occurred to me that that was like a job. A lot of the jobs that were listed in the summary of this book were kind of like that. Like, oh, I mean, like I knew that that existed, obviously, but like I never really thought about like, oh, what would it be like to have that as your job, you know? So I thought it'd be a really interesting book to read. I don't know, it might be creepy, but I think it'll be cool. Okay, the next book on my TBR is like kind of similar in that I feel like I need to give you an explanation. So basically, I ended up on a Goodreads rabbit hole a couple of weeks ago. If you're not familiar with that term, you've probably experienced it, but it's basically where you just like keep clicking on the recommended books at the end of the page, you know, and you end up on like lists and different book descriptions and just kind of like hopping from one book to the next until like you don't even really remember how you got there. It's that kind of thing. And I do that every so often and just add a bunch of books to my TBR at once. I ended up on this list. It was actually kind of cool, but it was basically like a massive comprehensive list of like feminist literature throughout the ages. Some of them were like a little bit weird, not gonna lie, but some of them looked fascinating. And so one of the books on that list is called Medea, and it's actually a play. You might be familiar with it. My uncultured self was not so familiar with it, but it's by Euripides. It says it's one of the most powerful and enduring of the Greek tragedies, and it's basically about Medea, who was the wife of Jason, who I was familiar with because of Percy Jackson. But basically in the Greek mythology, Jason was married to Medea and had kids with her, but then he left her for a younger woman, I think. And so the play is all about like how Medea takes revenge on Jason, and it's like the psychology of the female villain. So kind of like the unhinged female literature of the ancient Greeks. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what books are on your TBR this month. And as always, let me know if there's any way I can be encouraging you or praying for you this month. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!